Anytime you're writing scenes or stories from your own life, whether that's for a memoir, a leadership book, or some other project, you will find that some chapters just fly off the page. It almost feels like magic. Other chapters, not so much. Other chapters, that blinking cursor will just taunt you. So how do we get through this? Well, one of the things that we have found at Page and Podium that is really helpful for our clients is to have a list of question prompts. So today I'm going to share those prompts with you. You can put them at the top of your new chapter document. You can answer them, journal them, use them to spark your ideas, and it is going to make outlining and writing your individual stories so much simpler. If you're in the middle of writing a memoir or a leadership book, you are not going to want to miss this one. If you're ready to get your story out in the world, but you've just been waiting as you're not sure whether the budget's going to fit or the timeline or the support, I get it. Every author is different. Every book is different. And that is why in December, we are rolling out 3 different tiers of service. You are not going to want to miss this announcement when we open to the general public. And if you want to be the first to hear, head to the link in the show notes, take the book strategy quiz. Once you do that, you're going to get a ton of helpful information now, and you're going to be the first to hear when we make these new tiers of service available. I can't wait, and I can't wait to hear about your book. So how do you get yourself unstuck when that chapter material just won't flow? Well, I've got 6 questions that you can write out, paste at the top of your outline or your chapter draft document, and use them to guide your work. I promise you they are going to help you figure out what you need to say and how you need to say it. So the first thing I need to say before we get into the questions is you've got to make sure with this technique that you have just one scene. Just one scene. One of the things that I see authors really struggle with is that they'll pick a period in their life as opposed to just one story, and they think that chapter should cover that whole period. Spring 1998, a 3-month period. Well, unfortunately, what happens is that when you try to write about one whole period, it's really hard to get it to come into focus because it's not in focus, right? How many things happened to you during spring of 1998? I was a junior in high school. A lot of stuff happened to me during that time, all very, very dramatic. Instead, what I need you to do is zero in on the one story that helps to represent that whole time period. Now, you might find that you've got a couple of stories from that time period, maybe 3 or 4 or 5 even. That's fine. But you've got to take it one at a time. There is not going to be any way that you're going to rush through and get them all glommed together. So even if it means you're going to have more scenes than you originally planned for in your book, you've got to choose just one scene. It's going to make things so much easier, especially to get started. Okay, so now for the questions as promised. All right, so the first question is going to be about timeline. Okay, so when you're thinking about this scene, ask yourself, what were you doing before that thing happened? What did you do after that thing happened? And then also ask yourself more specific questions about the time context. So one of those is going to be a broader timeline question. If you're writing a whole memoir, you might be picking different chapters to just start at in the middle. So what happened right before in your book? But also, what was the larger thing that happened days before, weeks before? What was the previous thing that led you to this particular scene? And then, based on that scene, what did you do next? What did you learn in that scene? And where did it propel you? What choices did it propel you to make? So thinking about your timeline is really going to help you give a context to your reader, but it also is going to help you remember who you were at that time. We're all growing and changing all the time. And one of the things that I do see, particularly when I work with leaders on their leadership books, is we kind of want to look at all of our previous activities from the lens of who we are now. And I bet you know that can actually be really, really toxic mental framework, because sometimes it can lead to us saying, oh my gosh, I looked so stupid when I was doing that. And I have had authors say that, is we talked through a scene and they started writing it and then they said, why was I making those dumb choices? Okay, be kind to yourself first. But second, when you're writing these past experiences, you've got to remember that you were coming from a different place. You did not have the knowledge, you did not have the experience, you probably didn't have the training. And your readers are probably right where you were then. So we don't want to say that they were stupid. We don't want to say that you were stupid. Instead, we want to think about what is the context of the timing. Why did you make the choices that you did in that moment? And it probably has to do with what happened before. What was the big event that happened before? And that particular decision probably shaped the next one that you made. That's probably next in your book. So you want to be thinking about this timeline context. What happened before? What happened after? What time of day was it? And where were you in the journey of your life? Okay. The second question I want you to ask yourself is the context of the people. So who was around you? Again, we're going to take this both in the micro and the macro. So the first thing you want to ask was, in that scene, in that one event that happened, who else was there? That is going to give your story so much more colorful context. So shout out to one of our coaching clients, Maggie, who uses these questions and loves them and encouraged me to use it in our videos. She pointed out that when she started thinking back to who was with her during some of these scenes that she's writing about, that sometimes it was kind of funny. So she is writing about some experiences that happened in her teenage years and through her young adulthood. And when she started thinking back to what it was like to be a teenager in 2004, 2005, it was all Jinkos and big chains. They were shopping at Hot Topic. They were wearing their baby tees. All of these things that are kind of funny to look back at, right? Now, I'll tell you, the things she's writing in her book are really, really heavy. They're really traumatic. She came through, and it's such an inspiring story. I can't wait to share it with you. But when you're writing a heavy story like that, or a story that has a lot of really hard lessons, your reader and you need that break for humor. If you can think about the people that you were with, you are going to be able to think about what were their unique personalities, what were they wearing, what did they look like, and that is going to give you such a richer picture when you think back in your mind's eye to what happened, why you made the decisions you did, and what that event means to you now. So think about the people. Who were the people in that event? But we're also going to take this to the macro scale, just like we did with timeline. When you think at the macro level, who were the people that were in your life at that time? So here we're not talking about that one scene. We're going back to your original instinct to get that whole time period in there. Now, I don't want you to think that that means we're going to back up and not do a scene. We're going to do a whole season. That is not the case. But rather, we want to make sure that we are putting that scene in the context of who you were. And guess what? Who we are is always based on who's around us. It always is. Because the people that we talk to on a day-to-day basis, the people we live with, the people we work with, the people we hang out with, those are the people that are really going to tell us where our mindset was at the time. Maybe you were with somebody that you later ended up in a long-term serious relationship with. Maybe they're your life partner or your spouse now. Well, that's going to tell you something, right? That time, that kind of young love time, that can be such an exciting time in our life. So even if you're going through something really hard, you know a little bit about that time period and how you were feeling because you know that you had first met that life partner at that time. Or conversely, maybe at that time you were spending a lot of time with people that you kind of wish you hadn't spent a lot of time with, right? Maybe you were spending a lot of time with friends that led you down the wrong path. Maybe you were spending a lot of time with somebody who kind of ended up being a toxic influence in your life. Maybe you were, trapped with a family member that is not somebody that you really want to spend a lot of time with. That's going to tell you too, right? Remember that guy who had said, "Oh, why did I do that stupid decision?" Sometimes the answer is the people that you were hanging out with. So if you can give yourself a chance to think through the people you were with on a macro level, who did you spend your day-to-day with? That's going to help you get, again, inside that mindset of who you were. So any of those can go in your scene. It just really depends on what you're going for and what you're trying to accomplish with that particular scene. But you might describe the micro, you might describe the macro, you might not describe either. But knowing what was happening in terms of the people you surrounded yourself with is going to give you such rich insight into the lessons you want to share with your readers. All right, we've got our timeline, we've got our people. The next piece of context, you guessed it, is place. So again, micro, macro, we want to think about the place where the thing happened. So that is going to necessarily be your macro place, right? Because is this your hometown that you were in? Is it a city you moved to after college? Is it someplace that you ended up settling? Where were you on a large scale level? Where were you living? What was your life like? My client Maggie that I just mentioned, this was a really big thing for her because she lived all kinds of places during that time period we're writing about. And it was really important for a teenager when she was, picked up out of Kansas and moved to North Carolina, picked up and moved here and there and into her grandparents' house and her parents' house, all of these places. That creates a lot of really tumultuous energy for a teenager, right? Being picked up and put in a new school, that's really, really hard. So if you can think about where were you in terms of place, how settled were you, how comfortable did you feel? Was it, a new place all the time? Was it the same place you'd always lived? What about that place is going to tell us about that period in your life? But also, this is one of my favorite parts about really any kind of a story-based book, whether it's memoir or leadership. We want to know as readers what the place that the scene happened was like. Here is where you're going to get your sensory details. What did that place smell like? What was the kind of vibe and the atmosphere? Was it loud? Was it quiet? What did it sound like? What did it look like? Was it dark? Was it bright? Whether that atmosphere matches what happens in the scene actually doesn't matter, because either you're going to get a contrast, something really terrible happened in a space that should have been so bright and cheery and neat. Well, that's powerful. Or maybe it was a place that seemed kind of unsafe, but one of the most amazing things of your life happened there. Or maybe it matches. It was a bright, cheery place, amazing thing happened. It was a dark, scary place, and a terrible thing happened. Either way, those sensory details are going to help paint a picture in your reader's mind so that not only can they be along for the ride, which is, of course, that's what we always want when we read a book, right? To be transported. But it also is going to help you in your memoir or leadership book to pull out the message of that event. If you have a contrast between what the place looked and smelled and felt like and the event, that's a powerful way to share what you learned because it's a contrast, right? It's tension. If they matched, then you can give us a little bit more context, and that's also going to help us kind of understand where your mind was and how it felt to be there. So we want to make sure that we're covering place as well as our people and our timeline. Okay, the fourth set of questions, number 4, we want to think about what were your emotions. Now, if you couldn't tell, I've been building up to this one because this is a really hard one to answer, right? When we think back to really pivotal moments in our life, the most pivotal, the most happy memory that you have, and the most terrible memory that you have, we know what those emotions were, right? Because they're usually, when it's a big event like that, in the moment, we have kind of what we now expect that we would have had, right? Because we lived it, it left an impression on us. Usually we're pretty good at coming up with what we felt like in that moment, even if it's kind of unexpected to an outside person. We know, you don't forget those moments. But when we write memoirs, when we write leadership books, not every scene in there is the most pivotal scene in our life. Sometimes we're just talking about the day-to-day. Well, how did you feel last Tuesday when you went grocery shopping? How do we know that? Well, unfortunately, you do need to know, But fortunately, if you start answering these questions about your time, your people, and your place, it's going to stir that stuff up. Now watch your mental health, because if we are writing about trauma, you are often going to find that something feels really heavy in your chest. I start to be tight in my jaw, or you just feel tired. You just want to lay down. Sometimes you'll yawn. That can be great. This is why I always suggest, if you're writing about trauma, to get yourself a therapist, because you can then debrief with that therapist, make sure that you're okay. But aside, as you're thinking about those emotions, really brainstorm. What were you feeling in that exact moment? What were you feeling in the next moment? What had you been feeling in the previous moment? And as you processed that event, however big or small, as you reflected on it, how did those emotions change? Did you start to come to terms with the thing? Or maybe in the moment you were numb and you couldn't feel anything. But as you moved forward, you felt anger, or maybe you felt joyful. Depends on what the thing is that happened. But we have got to know as readers what your emotions were. You're not going to write, I'm happy, I'm sad. But you are going to need to have in mind the general feelings that you had as you went through. Because particularly in memoir, we want to know. And in all type of books, we want to feel. You're not going to be able to write it if you don't know what you are feeling. Okay, so we've got our emotions. This next set of questions really is fed by that emotions question. So as you're working through, you really want to make sure you're thinking through things in order. And this next set of questions is all about your reaction. So here is my number one writing tip of this video. If you are doing something else, focus, come back to us. When you're thinking about writing a scene, think about how psychologically you process a new experience. All of us go through pretty much the same process when we encounter something new and surprising. First, we're going to see it. We're going to see the tiger in the jungle, right? Oh my God. Then we're going to get scared. There's a tiger. No one knows immediately what to do when you come across a tiger, although I guess if you're in the jungle, maybe you should have a plan. But you are going to have to see the thing, and then you're going to have the reaction, but then you're going to have the response, right? We always have that sensory bit, then we have the processing bit, then we have the reaction. So how did you react when the turning point of that scene happened, when the main thing that you needed to encounter and process and deal with, when that happened? First of all, what did it look like? Second of all, how did you feel? And third of all, what did you do? How did you react in that moment? Whether, again, you think that that was the right reaction or the wrong reaction, we need to know, how did you react? So when you think about that scene, what did you see? How did you feel? And how did you react? In that order, that is going to be the easiest way to write your scene with a lot of impact. But of course, you've got to remember what you did. So think about the step-by-step, what happened and what did you go through? How did you react to that? All right. And last, but certainly not least, you lived this experience, but we didn't. So we've got to know what you expected to happen. In other words, when you came into that place, or when you encountered those people, or when you hit that time in your life, what were you expecting? Were you expecting that that was going to happen and it went exactly the way you thought? That is pretty rare for most of us. Probably you thought something else was going to happen, right? Probably you even told yourself, wait a minute, this isn't what I thought was coming. What's happening? Well, that's an exciting point for the reader, right? However hard that was for you, your reader wants to feel that with you. So as you're thinking about your expectations, really think about, in the micro, what happened right before that made me expect or not expect this thing that came next. And then how did that challenge the expectations that I had in that moment? But also, particularly for memoir, what did you expect your life was going to be? Did you expect that something like that was going to happen to you? If not, How did that change you? If so, how did that confirmation shape the way you were moving forward? What did that mean to you, given that there either was tension or there wasn't? How did that shape your message and tell you what you should take away, how you should change, or how you should stay the same? This is the kind of thing that really we want to get into in every single book that we read that has any kind of stories. We want to know, did you expect what was going to happen, or did it take you by surprise? Okay, so as you're going through planning for your next chapter, I want you to keep these questions really close to your heart. And if you find that you can't just start writing based on the questions, it might be a sign that you want to step back and journal. Just get all of that stuff out. This is particularly common when we work with people who have a lot of trauma, or frankly, just one big trauma. Often is that writing, the act of moving your pencil over paper to tell your story, that is going to be a powerful way to signal to your brain that it is in the past, that you are safe now. Now, if you find that as you're writing, having the questions at the top of your document is just not enough to really guide you where you need to go to get this chapter to work, you might find that you need to journal. One of the things that I have learned from my amazing therapist is that when we write, the movement of our hand over the page can help signal to our brain that that event is in the past, that we are safe now and we are reflecting, not living in that moment. I find that happens so often with people that have been through a lot of trauma, is that there is a lot of processing that's going to happen as you're writing this book. So be kind to yourself. Use every tool at your disposal, a therapist, journaling, taking a break. And I know that you are going to get that scene out of your head onto the page, and it is going to help so many people. I would love to support you one-on-one if you're thinking that it might be time for you to bring in some professional support in your book. Stay tuned, because I have an exciting announcement about some of the new things that we're launching next month at Page and Podium Press. I am on a mission to make sure that everyone has access to the support and tools that they need to tell their story and tell their story well. And that is why I am so excited to roll out 2 brand new offers that are going to fit so much more comfortably into a whole range of budgets. Now, the first one I can't share with you quite yet, but if you are looking for a community of support and skills and tips and all of the things you need to move your memoir forward, keep an eye on this channel. But the one I want to tell you about today is the Change Maker package. This is a brand new package we're offering that is going to give you all of that ghostwriting, all of that editing support that you want, all of the help to get your story on the page, even if you're just not a writer. So that package is only available to our newsletter subscribers right now, but if you want to be the first to hear when we open it to the general public, I hope you'll head over to the link in our show notes and take the book strategy quiz today. That's going to help make sure that you get all of the information you need about what the path your book should be on and how to sign up to have us help you get it out into the world. I know that you are ready for this and you deserve to have your story out there. So sign up for that quiz right now. The link is in the show notes, and I can't wait to hear about your story.